And welcome to the CFMU 93.3 FM radio show and Apple Spotify podcast, The Coolest Journey, where my guests and I explore the intersections of health and environment through reflections, tips, and tools for everyday living so we can all improve our lives. I'm your host, Hélène Caron. If you've ever been to Montreal in the winter, you know how cold it can get. -10, -20, -30, -40. Montréal, that's my hometown. And it's also where I once ended up with frostbite on my nose during an after dinner walk at -40 something. It's no joke. And if you know Montréal, you also know the St. Lawrence River, le majestueux fleuve Saint-Laurent. Its beauty, its power. Even from old Montreal or the Champlain Bridge, you can see how strong the current is. Maybe you've been to Lachine to play in the rapids in the summer. Then you already know how unpredictable and dangerous this body of water can be. Now, imagine being in these challenging waters at -40 degrees Celsius. My guest today, Orion Miller, does exactly that. Although he hails from BC, he's known as the ice surfer who braves Montreal's eternal wave. He's also featured in the award-winning short film Orion, a unique lyrical journey into the why behind his lifestyle of pushing beyond the boundaries of cold and winter. Released in 2024, the film is available on YouTube and it offers a striking glimpse into the feat of surfing frigid waters in search of landlocked waves amidst ice flows. And in search of so much more, because most of us don't take on extreme activities like ice swimming or ice surfing just for a fleeting high or for bragging rights. Of course, we'll cover the basics today, but we'll also dig much deeper into what might drive a healthy individual to willingly step into such a high-risk environment. Orion, thank you so much for joining me today, and welcome to The Coolest Journey.
Thanks so much for having me, Hélène. Happy to be here.
Oh, I am so excited to talk to you for many reasons. First of all, I saw your short film. It must have been about 2 months ago. And then I reached out to you as soon as I saw it. And I thought you need to come on my podcast because I talk about everything cold, both literally and figuratively. And then here you are doing something similar, yet quite different from what I do, which is cold or ice water swimming. So tell me, you are from BC. Is that where you grew up? Is that how you developed a certain relationship with nature in winter as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in BC and snowboarding was my main winter sport as a kid. So I was already out in the snow, although the snow versus the water in the winter is a completely different thing, as you know, walking with a nice down coat compared to immersing your entire body in ice water is it's a whole other level. So yeah, it started with the outdoors. The love of the outdoors started in BC. So just hiking in the mountains all the time as a family, exploring canyons and waterfalls and all that kind of stuff. And other sports outdoors as well, such as like rock climbing. And I was just really into personal experience of the outdoors where it's really just you and the elements. So I was always drawn to that. I'm not sure why exactly. Um, Definitely just from being immersed in it. The culture of BC, as you know, is very much outdoors and pushing yourself, but also respecting the environment and getting in tune with that. So it started with that snowboarding, rock climbing, exploring, not mountaineering so much, but definitely like backpacking and all of that. And then when I moved to Montreal, I spent 10 years there. And then that transitioned into the cold because it's so cold out east, as you said in the intro. It's insane.
And I don't think people in BC, I mean, it gets cold in BC, especially when we go northern BC,
Yeah.
northeast BC. But, you're in the Kelowna area, I think, right? Or
Yeah. Now I'm in Vernon. So just
Vernon.
half an hour from Kelowna.
Yeah, it
Not cold.
gets, yeah, I was gonna say it gets cold, but not that bad. That's wine
Not compared to
region.
out east.
No,
Yeah.
no, no. Unless you're in the Niagara region, which is also more temperate climate.
Yeah.
But Montreal is on another plane altogether. And Quebec City, and it's like Edmonton, right? They see much more extremes. So basically,
Yeah.
you grew up in BC, you moved to Montreal for 10 years, and you're like, I'm gonna make winter my friend. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I found surfing in Australia when I was living there. I lived there for a year. My wife and I went on a long trip together. We did a 2 year trip to India and Nepal, a full year there, and then flew to Australia and spent a whole year there. And I found surfing in Australia and I fell in love with it instantly. It was just kind of like snowboarding, but 10 times harder and 10 times more rewarding. And all the things that I love about being in the nature and fully immersed, I found were amplified with surfing. I don't really know if it's because it was new or if it's because it was so different to me, like warm water. And they have cold water too, obviously, in the South, but sitting out in the water for hours on end is very different than what we have in Canada. In Tofino, the water is a lot colder, so I don't know if that was the flow that attracted me or if I don't know what it was, but I loved it.
I
So
I've
it's
got a
irrelevant.
I've got a few. I mean, I don't do surfing at all, but I did do some body surfing when I was in various areas with waves. And I've got a few theories about why it's more intense than skiing or whatever other sports that we could be doing on the snow.
Hmm.
Water is unpredictable. We want a wave, but we don't know when it's going to come. And so when it
Hmm.
comes, it feels even more like, oh my goodness, it's here and I caught it. It's almost like this miracle of timing. But for snow, if you're going down a mountain, you can go back up the mountain and do exactly the same route and you're going to have the same conditions. But that one wave might be the only wave like that one that you're going to catch.
Yeah, so I think sort of like the ice, like we're going to talk about later, like the suffering that you have to go through in order to get the reward makes it that much more valuable. So I think you're right. That's probably why I fell in love with it. So when I moved to Montreal, I found out that there was a river wave there. And the first thing I did was call up my cousin who shapes boards out on Vancouver Island. And I was like, hey, can you build me a board? Like, I need to surf here. Of course, there's tons of amazing shapers in Montreal, but I didn't know that at the time. And I had the connection with him, and he was kind of like teaching me some things about surfing because I was still quite new. So he sent me a board, and then after that, I just made it my life. I loved it so much. I was playing music there and doing tons of other things, but it was always like in the background, something that became more and more of an obsession with time.
Now, a shaper, tell me what that is, because I'm new to the surf world. What is
Right.
a shaper?
So surfboards are foam, usually most surfboards, and they come in a foam blank. So it's just a big, long chunk of foam, like a rectangular board shape. And so the shaper cuts the foam, adds wood pieces for strength, glues it all together, and then actually sands down the sides and planes it and makes it into that shape and changes the rails, which are the sides of the surfboard. So basically, hand manipulates. You can also have machine shaped boards, but it's really cool in surfing how hand shaping is still a really important art. And they shape it so that it'll react with the wave exactly as you want it to. So thinner in certain places, thicker in other places, channels down the bottom sometimes. So the water wicks and then the placement of the fins, all of that influences enormously how it rides. It's not like a downhill bike, mountain bike versus just a cross country mountain bike, they're quite similar. There's different angles to the frame and stuff and bigger shocks, that kind of thing. But with the surfboard, it changes everything. Like just moving the fins forward or back 1 inch could completely change the ride. So the shaper is very important.
That's very interesting. And then you say that there are many shapers in Montreal.
Yeah, there's
That's
several like full-time shapers there because of the surf community there. And then there's lots of people that dabble in it too. Shaping is cool because if you don't have to be an amazing shaper that makes it your life goal to make perfect boards. You can just make a board. So it's a lot easier than making a guitar. It's not going to be an amazing surfboard, but necessarily maybe it will. Maybe you'll be lucky, but either way, it'll be fun to ride, which is cool about surfing.
Right. I'm just amazed that there's a community of surfers in Montreal, and I'm guessing it's all because of that permanent, well, it's not permanent, but it's that wave that is often there. Now, tell me, when we talk about eternal wave, basically, those are the waves on the St. Lawrence River. Where exactly are we looking? I know La Chine is pretty tumultuous. I'm guessing
Yeah.
it's a bit of a challenge to get out of there alive,
There are
correct?
big
Or
waves in the Lachine area for sure, but you have to know exactly where to swim. And ideally, you'd want either kayaks or a jet ski or some kind, at least for your first time, because it's when you're at the level of the water and you're swimming and there's big standing waves and rapids, you can't see what's coming. So you really have to have it all mentally memorized where to go. So that's one area that's like expert, and most people don't surf there. And then there's Vagagui, which is in La Salle. That's a small little wave that's super accessible, that the city actually made like a nice aménagement where you can like get down to the water easily, and they've like accepted it as a sport, which is super cool. And then there's Habitat 67, which
Mhm.
is by the old port, and that's a bigger wave, a little more challenging, and it's more like guerrilla style. Like you have to, there's no like fancy city paved walkway down to the wave. It's just like a dirt path, and but that's the wave I prefer, and that's where I always surfed.
So the one that we see in the short film, is that the one by Habitat 67?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Wow. And there's quite a large community of surfers around those three locations, basically.
Yeah, around the two locations. The ones in Lachine, there's just a few people that go, and it's also
Okay.
kept a bit hush hush because we don't really want to share that with too many people because of the danger. Like it's a much higher level of danger. You're way out from shore, and if you can't find the eddies or if you fall into it's any of the whitewater dangers, they're all there, and you want to avoid the dangers, you have to know where to go. So we don't really talk about it. There's other waves all over Quebec that we don't talk about either because you just don't really want people going there that think they know that don't. So
Yeah, it's the same
just
thing
for
with
their safety,
ice.
you know.
It's like it's the same thing in ice swimming. The
Yeah.
community, like we know certain spots we can go swimming in. And actually, this one behind me, you can see on my background. This is an ice pool that's carved out of the Ottawa River at Britannia Beach, and it's fairly safe for beginners. But there are other areas we would never ever recommend to people to go in the first time. So we usually don't talk much about those areas.
Hmm.
So, if anyone is a surfer listening to our chat, just ignore what we were just talking about and focus on maybe Habitat Sunset, or find a group of surfers and get your find
That's the
your
key
surf.
with exactly with any of these extreme things. The key is to find people who know and who will welcome you and show you how to do it safely because it's just not worth going into it in a dangerous way.
That's right. I mean,
And you
it
might
can
not know.
go.
You might look at it and think it's totally fine, but when you get out there, it's a totally different world.
And I don't know how often it's happened to you. It's happened to me a number of times when I've taken people out with me, and it could be in the spring and fall, not under that extreme temperatures, but the water would already be at about 10, 12 degrees. I take people out and I tell them, wait until I come back. When I'm back, then you can go in and then I'll stay with you, right? So that then I get out with the person and make sure they're okay, that they don't freeze on the side and all of that. And too often people are like, oh, but this looks like so easy. And of course I'm going to go in. I'm not going to wait for her to come back. And they go in and I'm like, I come back and I'm like, what, why did you go in before I came back? And they're like, I thought it was going to be easy, but now I don't want to come back anymore because this was scary and I got really cold and I thought I was going to be able to do it, but I panicked and like all sorts of things come up. And so yeah, finding a community, doing it safely, listen to the ones who have more experience, right? It's really key. So that's how you moved to Montreal. You're doing surfing. So surfing is a summer activity. You've got your winter activity. When did you decide to just keep on surfing through the winter?
I think it just happened totally naturally because I arrived in I arrived around October, but I didn't surf that first winter because I didn't know about it. I was getting the board sent and everything. So then by spring, I started surfing. And so I had several months there to just surf and figure out the spot and kind of learn the basics of and the differences of river surfing versus ocean surfing and the etiquette and learn the spot. And then when it started getting cold, people kept telling me like, "Oh, the season's almost over." And I was like why? Like nothing's changed. The water's a little bit colder. What's the difference? It just didn't make sense to me. Like I was so fired up about being out there and surfing that I was like, there's no reason to stop. So I just got a thicker wetsuit and just kept going. And there was a point though when I went out and realized why some people definitely should stop and why most people will never want to do it. And that was when the ice started coming down. And
Mm.
so that's a clear memory for me. The very first time I went out, saw ice from the top and paddled out anyway. And I was like, well, it'll probably be okay. And I got in and caught the wave and had a good surf, but I realized quickly how much different it was and how much more dangerous it was. My board had holes in it from the ice, and
Oh
it
my
was
goodness.
very cold, much colder. And swimming back, there was this swirling pit of ice that forms that I didn't know anything about because I'd never seen it. And swimming through that takes way more strength than just swimming back normally. And so that was a wake up call for sure. I think I just did one wave that day and then kind of reassessed and was like, if I'm going to do this, how can I do it more safely? So for the first year, I avoided the really icy days because the ice comes down. It doesn't really have to do with temperature. There's too many variables upstream things
Mhm.
and whether it's snowed or not and what the cities are doing and all the barrage and all of that makes a difference to the ice as well. So you can't really predict it. You just have to go and see. Besides the spring melt off, when the really big ice is definitely coming, you can't predict it. And even then, it comes in waves. So I just went when I could the first year. And then the second year, when I was even more comfortable, and through the years after that, I just started figuring out ways to go even when it was icy and push the limits further.
Right. So let me ask you a question. You already knew when you started to surf that it was giving you that probably feeling of elation, or you needed to get to be out on your surfboard. You moved to Montreal, you continue to want to be out of on your surfboard. What was different between surfing en température clémente, in normal weather conditions? What was it that made you push to continue surfing in the winter? What is it that you were chasing?
So, like I said at the beginning, it was just natural. I was purely obsessed with getting as many days in the water to improve my skill and to surf as possible. And then as my skill improved and I was confident on whatever condition in the warm weather, and same thing in the cold weather, then it was less about really, I'm always trying to improve in whatever I'm doing. Obviously, that's just kind of human nature, I think. But I found that the cold had its own benefits. And I definitely found that because of the extra intensity, the focus that it took when you're out surfing in that condition really gave, I wouldn't call it like adrenaline. It's not like adrenaline at all. I think that's a big misunderstanding when people see my posts and things like that. They really think that I'm out there just for the adrenaline rush. But in reality, it's the opposite. I'm really finding a state of like deep peace and centeredness that comes from the extreme concentration necessary. And that comes from the danger of the ice, and it also comes from the cold. Both of them are different, and they both work together to make this kind of hyper concentrated, peaceful feeling, which I've felt as well, just doing ice baths as well, and cold water, not cold water swimming as much, but just cold plunging in nature, especially, you feel a similar feeling. But then you amplify that with the constant scanning of the horizon for blocks coming down at you, and it amplifies it even more.
Would you call it serenity, maybe? There's a
Yeah, for
certain,
sure. It could be described as serenity, as peace, as bliss, as expansion. It's very meditative. Yeah, any of those words and many more for sure.
yeah. And it's the same for swimming, but I'm assuming there's because you're on a board and the speed. at which you're surfing is faster than what we would be doing swimming. And then you've got these ice flows coming at you. There's that element of speed and reaction time that, I mean, maybe if we had a whale coming at us or a shark, we'd have that that speed then, but otherwise it's pretty calm for us. But for you, you've got that added hyper focus that's needed in order for you to stay on the board. I know that when out there, there's that feeling of peace and serenity, but there's also that, so it's that connection to the self, that connection to the others who are with me, but of us also connection to nature. I always feel in the water we're more vulnerable than if we were on land. For example, snowboarding, there's still a certain element of control, but when we're in the water, gravity isn't necessarily there, which you have when you're on your board. But if you're in the water trying to move through the ice flows, it's a bit different how you have to navigate everything.
Hmm.
I just feel like that this extra connection to self, to others, to the elements around us. I feel like we're a very small part of the universe, and then yet we can still exercise a certain influence on that universe. Is that what you feel when you're out there, or is there something else that you can add to this?
No, I think you described it quite well. Yeah. It's feeling like you're totally minuscule and just this tiny dot compared to this majesty and power around you, but also feeling like as you have mastered yourself and mastered your fear and mastered your emotion as you do your activity, that makes you feel also like you can kind of take a part of that power onto yourself, of that universal consciousness or whatever you want to describe it as. Like you said, it feels like a little bit of that is now in a part of you, and not in like an egotistical way where you're going to do something rash or reckless. It's more, it's like you wouldn't even want to do something reckless because you don't need to, because you're a part of that bigger source.
Now, let me ask you a really interesting question, Orion, for me anyway. You're a musician. You moved to Montreal for your music. How does this influence your music, this practice of ice surfing?
Excuse me. Uh,
Bless you.
it's a big part. Yeah, the music is like the surfing. It's an obsession that's kind of always there in my consciousness, in the back of my mind. Songs, lyrics, everything's always there and happening the same way I'm always thinking of the surf forecast or the wind forecast or whatever it may be. To those two things, they're definitely the two driving factors in my life in terms of passions. So they influence each other. There's a give and take for sure. And most importantly, I would say that because of the cold, which is more confronting than playing music for sure, way more confronting, that gave me more, made me think a little deeper and allow sort of how we're talking about connecting to this deeper part of yourself or nature or whatever. It kind of allowed me to channel the music more than trying to create it as a ego type force, because it's
Mhm.
easy once you know how to write a song. The formula is there, you can just do it, you don't need to be inspired. But through the cold and the exposure and the surfing, I think that I can easier access the state of inspiration without having to wait for the inspiration to strike you, because that's also a big problem for artists. Is if you're just waiting for inspiration to strike but you have a gig coming up and you want to have a new song, then that's not, you can't just wait for that, you have to produce, right? So you either fall back on a formula and it's less inspired and you don't really care about it as much, or you get writer's block and you're stuck. So I think, yeah, having that kind of peaceful inner space and knowing how to contact it through a different activity makes it easier to access that artistic side of it, which is in my songwriting. And surfing itself or cold water swimming is artistic as well. I don't know if you feel that way.
So yes, I mean for swimming it's a little bit less, but because I'm always working on form always. You were talking before about the fact that you're always looking at improving yourself. It's the same for swimming, mostly because I'm always shifting the shape of my vessel. Am I floating on top of the water? Am I entering my arm right? But that's about as much creativity as I can have. For you to carve those waves, I'm assuming, so many different ways that you could do it that I don't necessarily have access to when I'm swimming. I mean, I could swim front crawl, back crawl, I could do doggy paddle, right? But it's not as, I feel like I don't have as much play, as much, as many options as you would have playing with your surfboard on a wave.
Yeah, I feel like with my experience is more cold plunging than swimming, but I think when I'm cold plunging, the difference is I feel like there's an internal artistic battle or something going on. And I'll watch my thoughts and kind of metacognize what's going on. And, you know, it's not always artistic in the way of writing a song or doing a specific maneuver when you're surfing, but it's almost at a deeper level because you're observing your thoughts and becoming aware of your inhibitions and how you are on that particular day and that particular moment because every day is different as well. So it's artistry, I think, but more internal.
Hmm. I like how you say it's accessing that really deep portion of ourselves, like that spiritual depth connected to nature without the vessel. I mean, we have our body and that's what connects us to the cold, but then it snaps us in the present because of that cold feeling on our skin. But there's something about the weightlessness of the water. I always say that it disconnects the nervous system. And by doing that, it allows us to access a different space in our mind and in our spirit. Um, and I find it interesting that you say, like you're always thinking about music and this and that and how maybe you find something different in the water, right? A different beat or a different sound. Quickly, I heard so you have a YouTube channel and I have the name of it. It'll be in the notes of the show. And there's a little clip that you have in there. It's you playing a hand drum. I don't see it behind you. I can see on Zoom here. You've got like a number of instruments behind you, but it was like a metal drum that you were playing with, and it was a bit of a healing music. Is this
Hmm.
some of the music that you're channeling when you're doing these cold plunges or when you're out on your board?
I think, well, it is actually there. It's this little bronze thing just in the corner of the screen. You can just
Okay.
barely see the edge of it. That's a hand pan. That's pretty recent for me, that instrument, and it is a very healing sound. It's a magical, mystical instrument. Um, but it's more of like I find that instrument very easy. So that instrument for me is more of it's all like there's no tuning involved. It's like a drum, so it's very easy to play. Um, so when I'm channeling things from the cold or from surfing or from these deep inspirations, I think that comes out more in lyrics and in inspired chord progressions or things like that rather than the handpan. I feel like the handpan is kind of already its own inspired instrument and it just makes its own magic happen. So I don't think I need to access anything for that. Obviously, you can go as far as you want with that instrument because it's simple doesn't mean it can't do amazing things and also be inspired. But yeah, it comes out more in poetry and deep thoughts and kind of out of the box progressions for me, I think.
hmm So I was asking the question about the handpan because I was thinking that when we're in the cold and we're in that present moment, there's something that happens to our brain, and maybe we're in a theta wave or something. And I was
Hmm.
wondering if that's what you're putting yourself in front of an instrument, a handpan or other, and that's the brain wave that you're accessing. And the more we do it in the cold, the more easily we can do it outside the cold, right? So it also informs our day-to-day life. And if that's how you were writing your music.
Yeah, probably if you look at the brain science behind it, I definitely agree with that. I think somewhere between alpha and theta is where the magic happens. And And yeah, I mean, if you can go to gamma, that's a whole other level of like ecstasy. But I haven't experienced that through cold plunging, that's for sure. It's too, I feel like because you're so much in the body, it would be hard to access that level, although I'm sure it's possible.
Maybe with another 10 year of practice, maybe both of us will be able to access that one day.
Yeah,
Um, I've got a couple more questions for you. So let's move back to the ice surfing. When you first decided to continue with the ice surfing, after people told you, oh, it's the end of the season, and you're like, okay, well, no, I'm not. I'm going to try and continue. So you get a thicker wetsuit. In terms of equipment or gear, is there anything else that you did that was different?
definitely. So that took time to figure out. But the first year I was limited by the board because boards are there's that foam as we were talking about earlier, and then it's glassed, which means it's covered in fiberglass and epoxy, and that's the hard exterior. That's what makes it gives it really its shape and structure, but it's very fragile. Like if you drop it from 4 inches onto concrete, it's going to have a hole in it and it'll now take on water. So ice chunks coming at you at the speed of the river plus the speed of you moving sideways on the wave is a big problem. So the first year I was just extremely limited by when I could go because if there were big ice chunks, it's just not sustainable to be fixing your board every single time you surf, and it's way too much work. So I did get decent at epoxy repairs, but I didn't want to be doing that all the time. So ultimately, with time, I fine tuned my setup. I found different fins. That's Eisbuck Riders, who are the sponsors for the film, and their fins were great because they're sustainably made and they happen to be super strong in the cold as well. So I used those. And the main biggest change was getting a soft top surfboard. Soft tops are like considered to be like beginner surfboards, but luckily at the time that I was in the market for one, people started shaping soft tops in a performance shape. So they're still really heavy and they're kind of chunky, and because they have the soft foam on the outside, they didn't have the same speed and everything. There's nowhere near like a good glassed surfboard, but in the winter there's no choice, and my it's so cold that there's literal ice frozen all over the deck on top of the board, like my feet are sliding on it. So I'm already compromising a ton on performance, so it didn't bother me as much. And when the ice hits those, it kind of just bounced off. It still damaged them. There's still like big chunks missing out of them, but it won't take on the water because it's like a closed cell foam the way they're designed. So yeah, with time they still get destroyed. The one I have now that I used in the film, the blackboard, is totally destroyed. I should probably just get rid of it at this point, but it has
Wow.
some sentimental value. So, and it's kind of fun if you need a board that you can just take out in the worst conditions ever, hit rocks or ice and know that it's going to be okay. So those two things, and then the warmer wetsuit and trying different wetsuits, different booties, different gloves, mitts, all of that took some time to figure out my ideal kit, and now I'm well set up. The
And I,
boots as well were really important to find one that didn't soak water in too fast. So like Solite is another brand that I work with, and there's just nothing that compares in terms of warmth. I tried all the other brands and they just weren't warm enough. So yeah.
and I saw you in the short film. You were pouring hot water in the booties too, right? Before putting them
Yeah,
on.
exactly. So that's
So
another tactics like that, knowing how to, because it's so cold, you're driving there in minus 25 or minus 30. And when you turn off your car, it's instantly cold in there. It's not going to stay hot. So I figured out that having like close to boiling water, pouring it in the boots and the mitts, and then dumping it out and then quickly putting the boots on. So there was no extra water sloshing around in there, and also so you wouldn't get burned, then yeah, that seemed to be the best solution. I've also poured it. I think I discovered it because I had some tea and I poured it down my chest because I was so cold. And I was like, this is a good, like, I'm just going to do this to make sure I'm safe or whatever. And then I just brought normal water after that.
yeah, and so you warm up your equipment. You put this on, and you also have a cap, and it covers your head, but not your face. So at minus 30, it's pretty cold. And we see in the film you've got like this this ice beard that's forming. Now, I froze my nose at -40. Have you ever gotten frostbite out there?
No, I haven't, and I don't really know why. I think my theory is that because of the exertion, um, there's so much blood pumping through your body that it just protects. And I think nose breathing as well is super, super important. It's really hard when it's cold because you can't, it feels like you can't breathe, but if you do a bunch of research on breathing, you don't need even close to as much. Most people overbreathe and they mouth breathe and they take in way more oxygen than is necessary, and that's detrimental. So if you know that and you feel the sort of suffocating feeling because you're trying to fight through the frozen icicles in your nose, then you'll realize you're actually fine. You're not going to pass out. You have lots of oxygen and it's all good. So knowing things like that, learning that over time really helped. And I think that, I mean, that's the whole purpose of your nose is to warm the air before it goes into your lungs. So even when we're doing sports, we should be nose breathing and yeah, fine tuning how to breathe and just how to move. And also not going like knowing your limits. That is also important. If it was, -40 plus a crazy wind chill, I might not go, or I would go
Right.
for a really short time. Probably just go for a short time.
Like the wind chill is a big difference as well, because if it's
Hmm.
just air temperature that's -40, it's different than if it's -25 with wind chill of -40.
That's
Um,
worse for sure.
oh yeah, the we lose the thermal envelope around us so much faster with that wind chill rather than kind of like it kind of stays around us when there's no air moving or it's minimal air moving around us. So that makes
Hmm.
a huge difference.
The ice
Even
beard as well helps too, because you think about it, it's all over your face. It's actually it's blocking the wind. If there's wind currents coming from the side, it's also hanging from it's not actually touching your skin because it's thawed right against your skin. So it's just hanging there, kind of creating a barrier. The nose is the most vulnerable part, like you said.
yeah, our poor noses. Oi, oi, oi. So still talking about protocols or process if you want. So now we know what you do kind of what you do before. You get out there, and then what we don't really see in the film is what do you do afterwards? What's your warming up protocol once you're done and you safely get back because it's a challenge for you to go over the ice with your board and go back to shore. You get out. How do you warm up afterwards?
Yeah, and I'm sure you know this from ice swimming as well. That's the most dangerous time because your core temperature's dropped. And if you're surfing, your core temperature stays up more than when you're cold plunging or ice swimming. But when you get out, immediately it drops fast. So because the wetsuit keeps you warm in water and when you're moving. But once you're out, especially if there's wind, the neoprene literally starts freezing around your body. So I have some videos where my hand is frozen in a claw and I can't close it even because it's frozen. So the main thing I found is just always have some of the hot water left over just as a backup if I need to pour it on my hands or whatever. I also have room temperature water to drink, but that's also good to know that room temperature water might be warmer than the air in really cold times like that. So that's a good safety as well. And then the main thing is just get warm as fast as possible. So I get inside my van, or if I have a car, usually I have a van, which is super luxurious and amazing because I can change inside. Also, I have changing robes, like ankle length robes that help if you are outside and just getting warm as fast as possible. So no towel. I don't towel off. I just get the wetsuit off and immediately put on like a base layer. I'm not that wet anyway, and my skin will dry it, and then put on warm clothes. So there's always layers blocking it, especially with the wind. The wind is the most dangerous thing. Yeah, it's nothing really special besides just getting dressed as quick as possible. I think, well, there is one thing which is just that you learn from cold plunging as well, is not to panic because
Mhm.
you're always putting yourself in those cold environments. You realize that your limitations are way further away than you might think in the moment. So if you start feeling cold, you can step back and think, okay, am I really in danger? How far am I from actual danger here? And if you think about it, you're like, I have easily half an hour of being in the elements, you know, before I would actually be in danger or whatever, depending on the conditions, of course. So just putting it in perspective and having that practice of being directly in the cold, not protected by anything, no wetsuits, really helped to know where that line is. And that's sort of why I started doing the cold plunging as well, was to help with the surfing, to know
Hmm.
where the line of danger is versus just discomfort. And that's why I started doing the breath holds as well, because sometimes you're going to be holding breath if you fall and you get sucked under. And I wanted to make sure I could feel that cold on my face and feel it flush down my wetsuit and not panic and then lose all of my breath and my ability to stay calm.
Right. This is fascinating. And so you get after drop like we do as well, possibly more because, like you're saying, you're moving more. Sometimes I do sprints for training in cold water. And I'm finding that when I get out from doing the sprints, my after drop is greater. And I
Mm.
think it's exactly like what you're saying, right? The heart is working a little bit more than usual. And then when we stop, everything goes down. The temperature, the heart rate, everything goes down. We have between 5 to 8 or 10 minutes of feeling really good when we get out of the water before the shaking starts. And yeah, we get claw hand as well, right? And we pour some water, like you said, room temperature water is a lot warmer than anything else. And within seconds, we get the mobility back into our fingers. Do you have the same thing where it's about 5 to 10 minutes of you're feeling pretty good afterwards, and then you start shaking from the hypothermia?
I don't ever get to the point of shaking with the surfing because I just don't, just because of the variables and getting so iced up. And I I really try to not get that far into it, because if I get to the point of that and then also I'm stuck in my wetsuit and my hands aren't working and I have so much ice on my face that I can't take the hood off, and it just gets actually more dangerous than if I was just in a bathing suit, because I can't get out into a safe environment as easily, and also having to drive home or get into the van or whatever. So I try to avoid that. For sure, I've been shaking before when I push it, if the wave's really good or whatever. But generally, that would happen later, like say when I drove home and was just sitting driving, still
Mhm.
freezing. And then by the time I'm home, my cord has dropped. And then by then, I'm relatively safe. So I just do my regular ice bath protocol and do a bunch of squats and put on some music or whatever helps to warm up, horse stance or, yoga, whatever works.
Right, right. We always joke that we turn our vehicles into sauna cars,
Yeah, for sure.
blast the heat and try and do our best. But this weekend, I actually had an interesting experience. I went to swim at a different spot. The water was at about 6.4, 6.5 degrees, which is actually kind of warm. It's not zero. Um, the sauna was about 7 minute drive from the water. So we swam, and after that, we just got into our car. We drove to the sauna, and then we had a nice chat. And you know, after that, we had some tea, and then chatted more, and then we all went home. It was pretty neat. And there's something about not we can't reheat too fast, and that's something
Hmm.
that always talk to newbies about, right? It's newcomers don't know, so it's not we don't want to necessarily go from cold to hot right away, which is not what you do either. So basically, you don't get possibly as cold as we do, but I have the feeling that if it takes you longer to remove the wetsuit, you could get colder than how we feel as well. So the rewarming strategy is also pretty important.
Hmm. And I don't like to do warm after the cold. Because I actually found a detrimental effect. If I don't let my body temperature warm up naturally, then I find that even if I was in a super hot shower or a sauna or whatever, I feel great when I'm in there. But when I get out, I tended to be chilled for the rest of the day or hours. It would take a really long time to get back up. So now when I get the ice beard off, sometimes if it's a huge ice beard, the only way to do it is in warm water, right? So I tend to do more like lukewarm and let it melt off, and then just turn off the shower as quick as possible and just then warm up naturally as well. So I'm interested that that didn't seem to affect you as much when you did the sauna.
Well, I have to also be careful because I could stay in the sauna a good 20, 30 minutes afterwards because I go in cold, but it's more surface heating rather than core heating. What I actually like to do, and this Orionus is a little crazy, but there's actually literature, science literature on working out cold. Dr. Craig Heller from Stanford University did a whole bunch of science research on this. Um, if you cool your body in between, let's say, sets at a gym or in between running spouts, if you're playing a game of soccer, you can actually last longer. So, what I've been doing is I swim in the ocean, I get in the car, I drive to my community center, and I hit the gym. So, I'm working out cold, if you want. I'm still warming up from the sauna car, but the sauna car isn't that hot. I'm driving a car that has 460,000 kilometers. It's a little Prius that doesn't heat very well, so it's not that
I can
much of a
relate to
sauna.
that.
By the time I get to the community center, the car starts to really heat up, and then it's too late. I get there and I work out, and I don't need as much rest as I would normally need. So if I'm working out not cold, I need rest in between my sets. If I'm cold, I can bang the sets out no problem. So I usually do circuits and bam, 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 bam. And I feel great because I get like a second high. So I get a high from the cold and I get a high from working out at the gym. And my performance is improving as well. So that's the pretty amazing part. So if ever you wanted to improve your performance surfing with resistance training, I highly recommend doing it afterwards. But you already mentioned that you do things like squats um, and lunges right after cold
Yeah, for
plunging.
sure. Yeah, and that makes total sense to me. Like I hadn't heard of that research until now, but and that actually makes sense for the endurance during the actual surfing itself too, because every time you fall off a wave, you're on the wave and you're kind of warm depending on the wind because you're not in the water, but then you fall and your whole wetsuit gets flushed with freezing water and you swim back in the freezing water and then you get back and you go back to the exercise again. And that kind of makes sense why it feels so good muscularly to do that. I feel like I do have extra force for sure in the winter. And you need it
Interesting.
because you're fighting against the huge wetsuit and the ice blocks and everything as well. So
Yeah, and the wetsuits it's a little bit restricting as well. So yeah, you have to really be adept at moving with your wetsuit. Yeah, it's not obvious what you do. It's pretty
no, it's
wild.
not for everyone for sure.
No. Now, are you the only one who does ice surfing, or is that community also of surfers in Montreal also embracing ice surfing?
There's a few of us for sure. I try to get friends out. I was probably, I mean, people have been doing this for years. There's videos of people doing it back before wetsuits were good, even in like the 80s, dodging ice chunks and stuff. Um, but I think in recent times, for sure, when I was living there, that I was really the only person who would do it on an obsessive level, like who actually liked it. Some people would do it just for fun or for the novelty or just to try it once or whatever. But I was truly like loving it and enjoying it. So, um, but interestingly, after the film came out this year, this winter, the wave has been surprisingly really good, like high quality. Usually the levels change, and in the winter it's kind of average, and you end up surfing these smaller waves that are really good, but the main wave is less good. This year it's been super good all winter and it's really cool. There's suddenly tons of people going, which is super interesting. I don't know if it's just like the 100th monkey syndrome. Like I've been doing it for so long and more people are starting and we didn't actually communicate, but now they're all doing it. Or if they saw the film and kind of realized that it isn't as crazy as it looks or what it was, but it's really great to see people out there.
And I think the more people do it, like for ice swimming, then there's more tips and protocols that come out and ways of making it safer and more enjoyable for everybody, right? From a gear point of view, warming up strategies, pre and post surfing. Yeah, pre and post surfing. So I had like both like surfing and snowboarding in my mind when I said that word. Yeah, yeah, it's fun. When more people do it, it it becomes a thing. And usually when we're alone doing it, people think, oh, that person is crazy. Then you get a second person who does it with you. Well, maybe they're not that crazy after all. And then you get a community of people doing it, and it becomes a whole, it's an activity at a whole other level. So that's really enjoyable. So
Totally.
talking,
And it's safer as well. Like it's good to have people around that aren't actively in the water because it's you're never going to have everyone in at the same time. And it's yeah, it's just nice. I go a lot alone and people criticize me for that. But yeah, so I do understand the benefit of having people around. I obviously realize that going alone is more dangerous than going with people, but I also know my limits super well and have literally spent probably 10,000 hours or more on that wave, literally like actually surfing, not just swimming. Like I've spent the time. So there, yeah, the danger is a little less when you know that. You have to always maintain the respect for it because things do happen. But at least I know the environment more than say my first season going in the craziest conditions. I didn't do that. I built up to it.
and it's a calculated risk as well. You know, we do these activities because we feel good doing them. And I mean, I know it happened to me. I slipped at Costco in a parking lot and broke a foot, tore my shoulder. I had two tears in my shoulder and injured my lower back. Here I am swimming in the winter and I get nothing, right? And I injure
Yeah.
myself in the
Ouch.
Costco parking lot. You know,
Yeah.
risk benefit for both activities.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. Um, so if we go back to the beginning when you started to do all of this surfing and what you were getting out of it, and now what do you get now out of it? What's the difference between the two?
At the beginning, it was very much, um, well, first of all, it was less conscious. I was just enjoying the sport in the first place and not really thinking about the deeper aspects, probably because there weren't really many deep aspects because I, or at least not that I could cognize because I had so much to learn in the sport itself that I didn't have the mental capacity to go any further or to be aware of what was happening under the surface. So with time, that definitely changed because I was able to, for example, when I'm standing on the wave surfing, my body was doing this automatically and I was able to look around and just enjoy this wild environment that I was in. So that was definitely a big change. Um, and I think it became more of a like less of a rush, less of an adrenaline seeking thing. It never was an adrenaline seeking thing. It was more of like a passionate enjoyment. But over time, even though my surfing became more aggressive, in as they would say in surfer lingo, which is like, you know, slashing harder, throwing more spray, like putting more physical energy into your movements, my mind was less aggressive. I was feeling a lot more relaxed in those motions and also in my own psyche in general. So like being in more intense environments, more intense maneuvers, and yet feeling calmer and more peaceful. And I think that's what the shift turned towards in general was that with, you know, the decade of doing this, by the end, it became less about the physical exterior experience and more about the inner experience.
So you're talking about finding that serenity, really, that centeredness in the middle of a the tumult of the, of, I'm not sure how to say it in English, but it's like this rushing water beside you, and you find this calm. And then there's the city right next to you that's this urban man-made space that's always crazy with stimulation, but you're in this nature space and you're finding this peace. How has this translated into your life in general? Because it doesn't mean that you can withstand uncomfortable or discomfort, uncomfortable situations a lot better because you do this surfing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do credit a lot as well to cold plunging because cold plunging for me is like the science lab version of the surfing. In the surfing and the ice surfing, there's so much going on that it's very hard to it takes, it took me 10 years to figure out that mental difference. But with the cold plunging, you're just sitting there. And so I was able to analyze what my mind was doing and analyze my reaction to the stimulus and watch where my thoughts went. And so, yeah, definitely. That's the that kind of self-awareness made it a lot easier when other things came up in life that were challenging, for sure. With the one exception, the one thing I still really struggle with is injuries, because I
Mm.
obviously love doing these things with my body. I don't know. I've gotten way, way, way better over the years, but in the past, getting an injury so that I couldn't practice my sport or couldn't do something would really throw me off. And it's better, but that's still probably the biggest struggle for me.
Hmm.
I
And
think
so,
because it's like I'm accessing this joy by using my body as an instrument. It's not The body isn't what creates the joy, but it is used in the process of that. And so I think when I feel like bereft of that mastery, then I'm like, how do I get this? Even though knowing that it's all inside anyway. It's consciously I know that, but it takes a little bit of practice to convince yourself of things like that.
and with injuries, sometimes we have to look at, um, okay, I'm injured and I can't do X, Y, Z. So what are my limits and what's the safe box, right? And how can I get that feeling that I get doing that activity, but within the safe box? How can I still keep that movement going so that I'm slowly but surely rehabilitating my body in order to get back to where I was. And it's not always an obvious straight line. There's always
Yeah,
step forward, step back, trial and error. But yeah, over time we get better. We
for
learn.
sure.
We learn. So with cold, especially with the ice surfing, we do step outside our comfort zone. Um, is there still some discomfort that you still resist even after all these years in terms of, I'm not sure, like, could you be going out and you're like, no, I'm not feeling it today because it's cold and my body's just not right? Or
I think that,
even,
well, I think the injuries are the thing that I resist the most. Like I really not that I'm afraid of them, but when then they if they happen, if something happens, then I just find it hard to let go and get back to my centered space. Um, yeah, and in terms of just days when I don't feel like going out necessarily, there's for sure days like that where you don't want to do it, but I have so much experience knowing that the what it will give me in terms of a benefit that I make myself go. Or I talk to my wife and she's like, "Why are you just wandering around looking at the forecasts and just like get out the door and go?" And she knows as well. Obviously, it benefits our relationship as well when I go do something that brings me joy. So she's definitely helpful in that way as well, which is cool because a lot of people think like, "Oh, like how could you be with someone who does these dangerous things?" And I'm like, "No, she's like kind of like kicking me out the door. Like she gets it."
yeah, I was actually going to come to that next point, right? Because you have a relationship and you became a father recently as well. Congratulations.
Thanks.
So it's nice for you to have the support of your partner. I think most of us who are doing the cold swimming, we kind of need our partner's support as well because of safety and all of these things. Um, with a child now, how does that change your relationship to ice surfing?
Definitely the threshold has been lowered for sure, in terms of the danger that I'll accept. And I think even more than ice surfing is something I've done for so long that I know at least at Habitas Sunset, like I know the conditions so intimately. I'm not saying there's not something new that could happen, but I know the water so well that even if something new happened, I trust that I'm going to know how to navigate it safely. A better example for this would be backcountry snowboarding, because the avalanche danger is something that is under the surface. Like you said, you can do a snowboard run the same every time, but on the fourth time it avalanches. And you're like, you're trusting the slope because you rode it a few times or whatever, but it
Right.
could go after that. There is a finer line. It's more hidden under the surface with that. And so, for example, now with backcountry snowboarding, I mean, I haven't gone at all this season, and I will only go when it's low avy danger now with a kid. I just think that I don't have the mastery to go to really understand and to go in higher levels of danger. And I'm not obviously not going to put that kind of risk because from the beginning, everyone thinks, oh, this guy's super risky, but it never was about risk. It's about accessing this kind of peace and serenity, like you're saying. So why would I feel the need to push? There's no need.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I had a conversation with a friend of mine about bragging rights of, doing these activities like ice swimming or cold water swimming. And we had to both catch ourselves saying, the bragging right is just, we're out there. That's the bragging right, right? It's not about how long are we going for, what distance we're swimming. It's not that. It's just, yeah, we're out. It's in the middle of winter. That's it. The rest is between us and the water and how our spirit feels, and then we become one with the water and the water becomes us basically. And I'm sure you feel the same when you're doing this surf. Now, as you become one with the elements and you have a little baby at home and you have to reassess this relationship, what is going to be your future for ice surfing?
Well, now I moved to BC where it's not as cold and I was living, 15 minutes from the wave in Montreal. So we moved here to be around family with our baby. So automatically I don't have access to the cold in such an easy way. People reach out to me to film and things like that, and so far I haven't accepted, but in the right circumstance I would, but in that case it's going to be very different because I'm not living somewhere where I can train in such an easy way just by being in it. Like for the past 10 years I never had to train for a surf trip when we went to Costa Rica or whatever, Nicaragua, different places to surf. I showed up and on day one I was surfing at my max capability because I was surfing every day. I was in shape. Now it's a little different. So I've got, I have to get up to that. So the main difference would be training. I'd have to train in a different way. And also, um, because of that, knowing that I'm not in the environment every day, just I would automatically lower my risk threshold, 30%, just so that I don't get cocky. Because it's easy to be like, everyone hears about people that are in their 50s that try something that they could do in their 20s that they haven't done, for the 30 years in between and they get injured. So
Mm-hmm.
being
Mm-hmm.
aware of not doing that is important, I think. And I think as an athlete, that's like one of my ways of life. Being an athlete, I think that comes naturally knowing where your limits are and not doing something that you're not actually prepared for. And it's dangerous enough that it's not natural to just go for it. A lot of people are worried that when people put out like my film, people criticize some of the criticisms are saying, "Oh, you shouldn't even release this because now people are going to want to do it." But it's like if you're a new surfer and you're standing on kind of like le bord de la rive, looking at the ice blocks the size of your apartment coming down, you're not going to go out. Like it takes you'd have to be really not intelligent to want to go into that if you don't have a high level of skill already. So I don't think that's really a worry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know someone at my local community center where I go and train at the gym and then I go and warm up in the sauna afterwards. He leads surfing trips on I think he does about 4 to 6 per year. And we're
Nice.
in Richmond, BC. We're not in Tofino. So we don't have the same waves. Even in Vancouver, some people might think, oh, Kitsilano, maybe you go and surf there. And we don't really have a wave there to surf
No,
on.
it's super rare.
So what he does for training is that he actually has a longboard, a skateboard that he rigged so that the wheels are all independent of one another. And think it's motorized and he rides it to the community center on a regular basis so that he still has that surfing motion in him. So that could be something. Maybe we'll see you in the streets of Vernon on a longboard, an electric longboard, and practicing your surfing moves.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, it's more the endurance, like the actual surfing at a certain level. It doesn't take a huge amount of energy to jump up on your surfboard and surf. Obviously, you need a good amount of fitness, but it's the paddling that's the savage fitness that needs. So I would be swimming laps and swimming long distance. And I think to be truly fit, I think I'd have to swim like 4 kilometers a day to actually be like surfing fit. And even then, you're not swimming in waves, so it's very different.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of swimming.
Yeah. So if someone, for example, hired me to come out and shoot in Montreal like tomorrow, like I wouldn't, there's no way I'd be prepared for that. I would I would have to take a few weeks of super intense training to be ready to do, the type of things I do in that film. It takes a lot of effort for sure.
Now, going back to learning about how you had a certain learning curve, right, to start surfing. What are some of the biggest learning experiences that you've had out there on the ice?
Hmm. Learning experiences in terms of the sport, there's so much subtlety in terms of how a surfboard moves in the water that you can't even really get into that or explain it unless it's to another surfer because it's like standing on a slack line or something, but it's, 10 times more wobbly. Um, I think it's more the like mental learning experiences that came through it. And that again goes back to the same thing, the original goal or experience of the rush of being in it. I think the first time you catch a wave, everything just goes white and you just don't even know what's happening. And you're just like in this kind of bliss state, like, whoa, what just happened? And then over time, you're more and more aware as you catch those waves and you're able to notice different things. And then ultimately, that brings you back to that sort of serenity within the chaos. There's a great quote I love by Paramahansa Yogananda, this yogi who traveled from India to America in the 20s. And he says that you should learn to stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds. And that really kind of encompasses surfing to me. That's how I feel when you're in the middle of dodging a bunch of ice flows and also maintaining your flow and in the freezing cold in the river or in the ocean, getting barreled and having this maelstrom of water encircling you and hoping you come out. And if you don't, you get tumbled big time. So it's really like finding that peace amidst the chaos that I love about it. And I think that's the biggest learning experience I'm still learning it. That's going to be a lifetime for sure. That's not
Mhm.
lifetimes probably.
Yeah, finding the calm within in the middle of the turmoil. And what would be the most dangerous mistake you've made, either physically or psychologically, in terms of decision making or something like that, that we could all learn from?
I haven't had many close calls because I have a good threshold for risk. I think it would be just those few times where I've paddled out thinking that it looked okay and underestimating what it was under the surface. Like sometimes you see the ice coming down and it looks kind of like crushed ice, kind of like slush or something. And then when I actually you paddle upstream, and then I cross the eddy line, and then I have to paddle through this ice and then get into the wave. And as you go down, the ice is kind of all around you. So when the current speeds up as it goes into the wave, the ice separates a little bit, and you kind of try to paddle through the ice, and then when the wave hits you, it pushes you forward, and the ice will pass you. And so suddenly all these ice blocks are
Come
now
at you.
coming at you instead of you moving
Oof.
at the same speed. So definitely there's been a few times where I've paddled out and I got into the current past the point of no return where I'm like, I can't paddle back to shore now because there's another wave in between that's super dangerous and too shallow, and I can't swim into that. And the wave I'm on is sort of the only way. So I can either let myself flush through the wave and just abandon, or I can go for it. And Yeah, there were times where it looked like slush, which is nothing. Like your fins can cut through it and it's no big deal. And when I got out there, it was like I'm in this field of, foot thick to 2 foot thick pieces of ice that are, it looked small, right? So they're like the size of a table. But when you realize that kind of thickness and you realize that it's how easy it could be to be crushed between them if you make one tiny mistake. Yeah,
And
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 I
just
guess what can you learn from that? I
and
guess
and just so
go
people
ahead.
understand these big blocks, Tom. So I've got this picture behind me of the ice pool that Tom hired carves out of in Ottawa. Each one of these little blocks that's standing up, he says they're about 2 to 300 pounds. These
Exactly.
blocks. So the ones that you're talking about, the big 2, 3 feet deep and as big as a
Well, it's like the
table.
entire ice pool there in
Ex
is can be one
exactly.
block, it can be 100 feet long sometimes.
That would be a ton. Like that
Yeah.
would weigh a lot. So if you're crushed in between two pieces like that, you don't stand much of a chance.
Yeah. So what can you learn from that? I guess um that's a hard one because once you're in the current, there's nothing you can do. You have to commit. So I guess that's the main thing is you paddle out, just put yourself in that kind of mindset. You're paddling out into this situation that you perceive to be a certain way. You arrive and it's way, way, way worse than you imagined. And what do? You can either panic and that's not going to help you at all, or you can try to abandon. And that's also a dangerous tactic in this scenario because it'll take you into a part of the river that's more dangerous. Or you can just be like, this is the situation I'm in, laser focus and make the best of the situation. So I guess that's the lesson that you learn is you acknowledge the situation you're in, you acknowledge that it's a dangerous place, and then immediately direct all of your energy instead of
Mhm.
fear to the focus to get out of it safely. And generally speaking, the best way to get out of it safely for surfing is to get on your feet where you have total control and can actually see way more of what's going on. So sometimes I got to my feet, sometimes I didn't, but I never got crushed. So
Yeah,
it's
you're
all
here to
good.
talk.
That the focus worked.
Yeah, you're here to
I mean,
talk
I've
about
been
it.
bruised up for sure. I've been very bruised up, but yeah, never been totally crushed between two blocks, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's a lesson in letting go, right? And being in the present moment and not thinking, oh, I shouldn't have done this or that. Like you don't have time to think about that.
There's no
Otherwise,
time.
you get crushed.
Exactly.
So
It's all this is all happening in split seconds too. Like 1 second, this whole mental conversation happens. So like you said, there's no time at all. You can't berate yourself or you can't panic. You definitely have fear, but you channel that fear into a positive expression, which is focus and concentration and knowing that your body can get through it, knowing that you do have the skills. Because if you doubt your skill because it's scary, then guaranteed you won't perform well. But if you can completely deny that and say, no, I have the skill to do this, and I know that my body will perform, so I'll let my body do its thing and I'll focus on being aware of everything that I need to be aware of.
it's interesting that you bring this up. I had exactly that situation happen to me. It was one day that the water, we call it sometimes the lake flipped or the ocean turned. The water went from something like 17 to 12 degrees, which is a huge dip. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was out for something that I thought was going to be a 25, maybe a 30-minute swim that ended up being a 40 to 60-minute swim. And the current took me to somewhere that I didn't expect it was going to be taking me. And I'm in the
Wow.
ocean, and it took me more towards the beach, which is a good thing. But it still took me very much around. I had to fight, and it was a strong current that day. Once I got into the current, it could have taken me out to the ocean as well. So that's exactly what was going through my mind. This is strong current. I've been here before. I have the experience. I've put in hours and hours and hours. I didn't have 10,000 hours at the time, but for sure about 5,000 hours, even just in that Kitsilano Bay. And I had to say to myself, like, this is it. This is just a situation. And I just have to calm down, breathe through it, and I'm going to get there. It's just, I have to have the confidence to do it. And it's amazing how it's like, okay, well, just have to let go of that fear that could be there and just focus on the moment. I'm assuming that's probably what's going on as well. I'm not sure if you have time even to think different depth level of thinking. You know what I mean? Like you've got a lot more speed coming at you. You've got these ice blocks and it's much more present moment. While I'm swimming, it's the same motion. I've got more time to think.
That's
So
scarier in a lot of ways because you can easily spiral back to that fear over and over if you're trying to fight your way into shore for 30 minutes or something. That's intense for sure.
yeah, yeah. In both cases, right? That you have to make split second decisions. I have to make sure that I control the demons inside my head.
Hmm.
So that's interesting. At the end of the day, it's both about letting go and just being in the present moment and relying on our experience and the confidence in our bodies that we can do this. It's going to be
That's
fine.
exactly it. Yeah. Trusting that you know and your body knows. You don't even really have to use your mind at all. Probably we would be better off if we turned our mind off completely and just let our bodies do it. So yeah, and then surrendering, but also not surrendering too much. You don't want to just get complacent because you do need to fight the current or you're going to get sucked away.
That's right. Now, Orion, have you ever had a strange or unexpected encounter out there? And I'm asking the question because we've had a swimmer, and this was possibly in September, a seal torpedoed the swimmer. So
Oh,
we are
wow.
guessing the seal was probably fishing, going after something, and didn't really, you know, evaluate the distance as well and crashed into the swimmer who got like a huge bruise on the side. And other times as well in Lake Ontario, we actually found some frozen American eels in the sand. So that was odd because even just the week before I learned there were eels in Lake Ontario, I never knew there were some, and there they were frozen in the sand. So have you ever, I don't know, had a fish jump in your face or anything like that?
I have a oh, there's tons of things for sure, but because it's cool because it's the river in Montreal, it's in this super big city, and yet suddenly you feel like you're in nature. And I know it's a super polluted river and there's all kinds of problems, but it still feels like nature compared to when you get out of the water and suddenly you're in the old port, you know. It's a completely different place. So um, even seeing just, you know, a pelican or not a pelican, sorry, a heron, blue heron fly by. I've had a blue heron fly by, you know, arm's length from me almost, which is maybe 2 arms lengths away, which is crazy because their wingspan is massive and you see them that close and you're on the water kind of flying yourself and they glide right by. That's been amazing. There's a heron hanging out there for a long time. Um, Another time there was a fish kind of surfing the wave underneath my feet, which was it was a really clear day and you could see all the way down to the bottom. And this fish was like a dolphin using the wave, but the underwater energy of the wave to kind of stay and carve underneath my feet, which was super cool. Lightning
So
storms.
So the fish was playing with you and the
Yeah,
wave.
exactly. I don't know if
That's so
the
cool.
fish was aware of me, but it was enjoying the wave for sure. Yeah.
And
I've also surfed a bunch in the summer monsoons in Montreal, and you get these crazy lightning storms. There was one time I was on the wave, and I kind of thought the lightning was a long ways away, so I still had lots. It was, you know, safe, but it was a lot closer than I realized. And suddenly, when I was on the water, it felt cold. I was just in board shorts, so it wasn't like cold water at all, but the air was cool, like it was sunset and suddenly the air heated up. It must have been at least like 8 degrees. Like I felt this hot breeze blow on me, like as if you're standing under like one of those blowing outdoor heaters. And I was like, whoa, it's time to get out of here. And the sky turned like green, like kind of that like tornado-y color. And I was like,
ah,
this is not the time to be on the water. So me and another guy were both on the wave. We were like, holy crap, let's get out of here. But it was amazing to be there. That wouldn't be something I'd choose because that's a bad idea being in the water in a lightning storm, but because I was already there, it was a very cool experience. And I've also seen lightning striking all around while I was surfing too. That's cool. The moonrise, I've seen some of the best moonrises of my life while I was surfing as well. Just huge on the horizon, rising right above the water, reflecting down the whole fleuve, like as you're carving in the moonlight. And then
Mhm.
night surfing as well. I love night surfing. I've had tons of really cool experiences on the river at night. I don't do that in the winter, in the fall for sure, but not in the ice because you need to see really well. But yeah, just like you're just kind of going by feel. You can't really see much at all, but you can feel the current in your fins and know where to go. And yeah, another time I had a ran this was at night, but it was sort of dusk, so I could see quite well. So, and in front of my board, randomly this crack opened in the water, and this happens in rapids because they're always changing, right? The current is never the same, even though the wave is there and it's static. The ripples on the wave are always very different, and the wave was super powerful at this point. It was at the ideal levels for a super strong wave, and suddenly I just saw this pit. It was like maybe 4 feet long and like a foot and a half wide. The water opened up. And I don't even know how this is possible. Two currents hit and created this gap. And so I was like going into a hole essentially. And then it closed right before it came up to my board and it sounded like a thunderclap. Like it was just like this bang, like right in front of me. And I was just kept surfing, being like, what just happened? Like that was
Wow.
amazing. So yeah,
Wow.
there's countless trippy things that happen when you're out there in nature in in the environment. And I'm sure anyone who does anything in nature is going to have tons of stories as well. They're all different, but they all have their own charm as well.
And I
Like the
think,
fish swimming under me is nowhere near as amazing to talk about as the thunderclap hole opening in front of me, but to me they're the same thing because I had that same amount of wonder and respect in the moment.
the wonder, I think that's a good word for it. It it's the wonder and the magic that happens around us every single day, and that we feel like we're extra connected to that fish, right? It's yeah, it's just
Yeah. And
amazing.
I didn't even talk about the ice either. Seeing the ice flows when it's calm and there's no ice, and then suddenly there's a big release upstream and you see it way in the distance, these ice flows coming down. So you have this like preparatory time where you're like, holy, this is coming to me. And then it's even bigger than you imagined. And suddenly there's just blocks of ice everywhere around you. And you're just getting your focus just going through it. It's countless experiences like that. It's amazing. I love the big releases. It's seems like the worst thing to like, but it's amazing. Or riding the ice blocks, going further upstream and riding them and jumping into the wave off of them. Like that's always a amazing
hmm
experience.
And we've seen you in the short film there where you're lying down on one of these giant ice float, and it seems so. I keep coming back to the word serene. It's just you're just part of it. You're part of the iceberg floating on the river. It's so wonderful to see that.
Yeah, it's so cool. It looks like it could be taken in the Arctic Circle or something, but it's in Montreal.
It's pretty wild. Orion, we're going to be bringing this to a close shortly. After our conversation, what would you like our listeners to misunderstand less about cold and ice surfing?
I think it comes back to the same topic we've been kind of coming back to in many different questions, and it's that it's not about the adrenaline rush. There are definitely people that do these things for adrenaline, like the ice bath bros who like won't even put their hands in the water and just flex and stay there for 20 minutes or something, but you're like you weren't even in the water. That's a different topic, but I think if you're really immersed in the culture of it, it's not about the adrenaline, it's not about the ego, it's not about trying to prove something, and it's more about accessing a deeper state of your inner self and connecting to something that is way bigger that we probably can't put into words, but it's just something that you feel and you find through the cold or through the surf. Or honestly, I think it can come through anything. I think mastery of music will give you the same feeling, or big wave surfing, which is way more dangerous than ice surfing, will also give you that feeling, or, a countless other things, any kind of art form or physical discipline that gives you passion. So no, not so much adrenaline and not so much ego. That's a big misunderstanding, and way more just being in the moment and doing it because you love it and try to connect to something bigger.
And let me ask you this question. Do you think that ice surfing is one of the coolest journeys of your life?
Yeah, totally. I never expected to do anything like that. I've always expected to do board sports and things like that, but I wasn't particularly drawn to the cold. I definitely didn't think I'd be looking like an Arctic explorer or something like that, but it ended up being something that's really important to me and that I absolutely love. And yeah, it's amazing, especially because I didn't expect it. It's even more incredible.
Hmm. And in terms of what's next, Orion, what will you be focusing on in 2026? Are there any specific adventures that are calling you now?
Yeah, I want to work on another film. I'm working on figuring out what it's going to be about. Um, but I want to self-produce everything on this one. So obviously I'll get some people to help shoot, but I want to do my own narration script. I want to score the music myself and do all the editing as well. So that's coming down the line once I figure out what I want it to be about. And then the other thing is wing foiling. I've discovered foiling here in the Okanagan because we have beautiful lakes here. And my obsession with waves was so intense that we thought we were going to move to the coast, but we ended up being here because of family. So foiling has kind of amplified my understanding of waves because you're surfing like a dolphin, like the foil is under the water. I'm learning to understand how waves are formed, how the wind forms the waves, and how to connect different waves in such a deeper level of understanding. So I'm actually really excited to focus on that. Probably, really not exclusively. I'll definitely still surf, but I'm focusing on that a lot right now, and I can't wait to see what that deeper knowledge will bring to my surfing when I do go to the ocean and the rivers.
Hmm. And those lakes that you have around you. So there's, my goodness, I'm drawing a blank on the names. I swim in
There's
Lake
oh
Kalamalka.
yeah,
So
that's an amazing lake, and Okanagan Lake is even bigger. It's also beautiful.
yeah, Okanagan Lake, there's Kaha Lake, there's a number of lakes all the way down to Osoyoos. They can get big chop. I've been in
Yeah, and I
them.
didn't realize this until I started foiling, but in the middle of the way in the lake, when the wind is high, you can have overhead waves, which is that was like the best news of my life. It was kind of like when I found out that there was a wave in Montreal. I was like, this is the best thing ever. Like, give me this. I need to buy a surfboard. When I found that out here, I was like, what? I need a foil. I need a wing. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to wish you some continued discoveries exactly like that in the Okanagan Valley. So thank you so much, Orion, for so generously sharing your time with me today. I'm truly honored to have had you on the show and to get just a little glimpse of behind the scenes of what drives you to do what you do. And for our listeners, if cold exposure and ice surfing are now on your radar, I invite you to do your research. Don't just go in without, oh, it looks like fun, and let's just do this. Connect with some local groups. You can do some quick online searches, and Facebook has a number of groups and WhatsApp as well. And, join a community, learn about your environment, understand the water you're entering, the quality, the currents, the temperature conditions, and so much more. You really, really want to know what you're getting yourself into before you step into the water and into the cold. If you'd like to go deeper into the science and the broader benefits of nature-based practices, researcher Mark Christie from Cumbria University joined the podcast twice to discuss green and blue therapies, essentially nature therapy in green spaces and water spaces, and the evidence behind their benefits. Those episodes are well worth a listen. Most of all, beware. This can be an addictive activity. I keep joking that I'm in the business of creating cold water swimming monsters, while Orion might be in the business of creating cold ice surfing monsters. So you got to be careful what you're getting yourself into. So thank you everyone for listening. And Orion, thank you once again.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, and wishing everyone health, energy, and the coolest journey of your life. Bye bye.